Hello, welcome everyone. At the moment, your mics are muted, so please write in the chat box and let us know where you're tuning in from and if you can hear me okay. That would be awesome. All right, now we have AK unmuted too. That's awesome. So a few housekeeping things to begin with. You're welcome to ask questions at any time. If you have questions for AK during the call, please use the chat box, or if you'd like to ask your question live, you can find the raise hand button from the participants list, and then we can unmute your mic and you can ask your question live to AK yourself. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Shannon. I work for Aerosports in marketing, and I'll be your host today. Our guest for the webinar is AK from AWOL Skydiving here in Australia, and he's going to be talking about mindfulness, yoga, meditation, and a bunch of other things of how flying is a way of life for him and what he teaches here in Australia. Welcome to the show, AK.
Thanks, Shan. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good.
I love your background.
How good is it?
It's pretty good.
I've only put 2 jumps on it, so at least zooming with it in the background makes me feel like I'm using it a little bit more, because I literally got it. I got it on like a Friday, and then by the Monday or the Tuesday or something, we were sort of like locked down and sort of begun.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I put 2 jumps on it on the Saturday straight away. And then if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have got to jump it. And like all drop zones were shut down. So I was super lucky.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. At least you got a couple on it to begin with.
Yeah. I was happy. I'm pretty sure if we ask Tane that question, he won't be so happy. So, yeah.
No, I don't think you will. Do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about you, a little bit about AWOL, and how you got into things in Australia with your events?
Sure. So I've been skydiving for around 6 or so years. I think I started in about 2014. So not super long. You know, when I talk to most people in the sport, not most, but a lot of the guys in the sport, guys and girls in the sport have been flying for a long time. You know, there's lots of 10, 15, 20 years in the sport sort of thing. So it feels like still a very short period of time. And so I still very much consider myself as a student. But yeah, I started in 2014 at a local drop zone in Melbourne. I did my AF with my brother, and it was, I still remember the first jump, and from there it was just a massive pivot life-wise. From there, it just changed everything very much, and I was pretty hooked. And from then on, I traveled initially, did a few events overseas. Within sort of 100 jumps, I think I'd started jumping at a few different drop zones already. And I know I went to Russia and flew in the tunnel over in St. Petersburg within about 100 jumps or so as well. And I think in terms of the learning phase, that was a big, sort of a big positive to just getting a big understanding for the wind initially within those early stages. And then I started probably coaching around 600 jumps or so. And AWOL started from there pretty much, and just started really as a bit of an attempt to just create somewhat of a pathway for learning, because I noticed for myself anyway, when we, as we were going through the sort of 100 jump, 200 jump sort of period, it's super tricky to go tracking was very, was not so easy. There was lots of sort of rules around, you had to have this many jumps, and so if you had less than 200 jumps, you needed someone with 200 jumps to lead a tracking jump, which obviously with more than 200 jumps makes very good sense. But, being probably overeager and impatient and all of those things that are pretty common to that period in the learning, I would say, I guess you're naturally in a bit of a rush. And so it was tricky to bridge that gap. And there was a specific example where we actually went out tracking, and this is not a very good thing, but I'm going to say it anyway. But we went out tracking, and but we manifested a flat jump, a vertical jump, and we went out tracking, and that really highlighted to me very quickly, one, just obviously how bad decision making that is, how badly that could end up, and the fact that there's such an opportunity to create a better pathway for learning, and to have a bit of a better platform for sharing information. And so that's really what AWOL began from. And then it just sort of, I don't know, it's just sort of continued to grow and into whatever it is now, which is just really the same thing. You know, we're just really trying to do the same thing. And obviously Tane, having Tane involved now is super exciting, and something that I'm, very, very, very excited for. We align on lots of levels, and obviously partnering with NZ Aerosports now and a few others. It's exciting times.
That's awesome. I know you have a bit of a unique path in skydiving a little bit, and how you talk about visualization for training and in the sport. Could you highlight that a little bit for us and explain that?
For sure. So I'm going to try and do this in the clearest way possible. But I guess when I think about skydiving, it's just such a psychological sport. It's so predominantly psychological in that if you think about it compared to any other sport, you know, if it's soccer or football or whatever, or tennis or cricket or whatever, you can be training and you can be hitting balls or kicking balls, or boxing. You can be sparring, and you can be warming up, and you can be training your craft. But with flying, you know, if we're at the drop zone in the morning and we're waiting to get on a load, we could be waiting on the ground for hours to get on a load potentially. And we can dirt dive it, but we're not doing it. We're imagining doing it. And then we go from being on the ground doing that to in the aircraft, where we're typically packed in like sardines a lot of the time, and your physical body is pretty much dormant, and you can move very little, to, you know, green light, door opens, go, and all of a sudden you have a 45-second window to sort of execute, like sort of, you know, like game time or whatever you want to think about it as. So it's a pretty unique sport in that respect. So when you think about it in that context, you go from having all this preparation time, and there's time to prepare and to get organized, but you can't actually do the activity. You can only think about doing the activity. So that's a kind of I can't think of another sport that's like that, to be honest. So when you think about it in that way, it gives pause to think about how you can best prepare. If you can't do it, how can you best prepare? And if everything we're already doing is just to imagine the activity itself, well, then it makes sense to have the mental models and practices to actually best prepare mentally is really what you can do, unless there's a tunnel on site and you can actually go hop in the free fall simulator and actually fly, which is not very common. There's not many other ways. So yeah, I suppose for me, like a big turning point flying wise was starting to do yoga, and from that led into meditation, and it just really opened my eyes to the value of it flying wise, and just what a psychological sport it is, and how best to prepare. So it just brings into the frame visualization, and how we can. So I suppose there's one of the ways that I explain it is, if you think about your brain like a computer, like your phone, there's all these things going on in the background. So your brain's super busy, super noisy. All your sensory organs, so your sight, your hearing, all your sensory organs are taking in all this information, and your brain's trying to do all that in the background while you're trying to focus on whatever the task is you're trying to focus on. So it's super easy to be distracted, and it's super easy not to be focusing on what you're actually trying to focus on. And so a classic scenario with this is like green light, up at height, and you're ready to go and hop out of the plane. And you can see everyone's so overly excited, and everyone's, massive high fives and all of this, but nothing's really happened. Like, obviously, you're excited because you're about to go skydiving, but really nothing's happened. You're just sitting in a plane. So, and I know when you've only done 100 jumps or whatever, it's a little bit different. But over time, when you do think about it, like, you're getting super excited, but right now you're super excited about absolutely nothing actually happening. you're excited about something that's going to happen, but nothing's really changed. So, and really all that is our way of dealing with the stress and anxiety of the situation, because the brain is dealing with, you know, when you think about first of all, you're at altitude. So you might be 15,000 feet. It's super noisy. It can be super cold, or it could be really hot. So there's all these different sensory inputs going on. And then depending on how well you've actually planned the jump, you might be thinking about, you're on a new parachute. You might be thinking about, I don't really properly understand what the conditions are. What were the winds on the ground again? Did I properly pack that thing like that? Did I properly put my, you know, stow my brakes, or whatever it might be? Like there could be a million things. Or then down to the actual jump, like where's my slot? What are we doing after this move? And there's so much going on. When you actually break it down, there is so much that you're trying to focus on. So one of the biggest things from my point of view to do is to try and this is where we use the time to plan, to prepare, to try and, if you think about double clicking on your iPhone and you bring up all the applications in the background, if you imagine that was your brain, it's like double clicking on everything, and you want to close all the applications in the background. And the way I think about it is, to close all the applications would be basically properly preparing and digesting the information so that you no longer have to think about it. So then you've spent the time and effort to consider the conditions. So it's like, cool, can close that application, that's done. And so you sort of have to go through each part of the, like to the conditions, to the jump, to your gear, all these different factors, and properly consider it all, so that when it comes time to actually getting out, your focus is very one-dimensional, and you don't have to think about all these different things at the time, and you can be very focused on exactly what you need to be, which is being in the right spot. And really, that's pretty much it, being in the right spot. And then if everyone's in the right spot, everything's going to happen ideally according to plan, and it's very, hopefully, straightforward.
That's awesome. And I know your progression, it's gone really fast over the last few years. You know, you mentioned starting in 2014. So you've obviously been using these techniques in your progression to come up through the Aussie scene, to start AWOL, to be leading and coaching at a really high level. So could you share some of the ways you use these practices in your everyday life, you know, the yoga, the meditation, the visualization, for your progression in the sport, and what that might look like for other skydivers wanting to do something similar?
I can try for sure. Where to start? I guess the first thing is probably just meditation, and just learning to just train your attention, which is really the way I think of what meditation is. It's really just the art of being able to focus on, it almost sounds cliche to say, but being able to focus on the present moment, being able to focus on what's happening right now in front of you, and not being lost in thought. And so I have a daily meditation practice where I'll sit down and just meditate for 20 minutes every morning, typically when I first get up. But I suppose that sort of has evolved a lot as well. Like it can sort of manifest itself in so many different ways, in that it could just be something as simple as, like for you and I, Shannon, as an example, like doing this call right now. It would be so easy to, as an example, I could be thinking about, before the call, I could be thinking about being nervous. I could be thinking about, I should be doing this, or I could be thinking about so many different things. And you can get very stuck. You sort of, the way your brain works is, or the mind works rather, is that you get very much in loops and patterns. And then you basically, once you establish those patterns, you typically execute the same sort of patterns and programs unconsciously. So it's about being able to start to recognize those patterns, and then we'll create new ones and short circuit the old ones, essentially. That's how I think about the meditation piece. And then I guess the other big thing, like yoga wise and physical wise, because you can't move past the fact that it is still a physical sport. Like obviously there is definitely a huge physical element to it. So I think just the body awareness is probably the big thing that I got from yoga. I wasn't like a naturally gifted athlete or anything like that in 2014. Far from it, actually. It's a hilarious thing to say, but it's like couldn't be further from the truth. So it really actually helped me give more focus to my physical body and to my health, and really focus in on those priorities. But yeah, the physical side of the sport is still a huge aspect. But for me, the body awareness was the thing that I really got from a regular yoga practice, and that's the thing that led to the meditation. So they all sort of go hand in hand. And then I think about like even the last event in that we ran in Perth. We had an event in Perth that I know you were there for, Shan. The West Coast edition we've done twice now, which was super cool, and yeah, super awesome event. And actually just before lockdown started, so enormously grateful that we had the opportunity to do that. But we had some super tricky weather conditions. I think the first day we sat on the ground till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we fired the plane up for 2 loads or maybe 3 loads, jumped 5 till 7, and that was it. And that was day 1. And then day 2, maybe we did a full day, and day 3 was like a full day off, and then maybe a half day the next day. So it was super disjointed, super broken. And even on weather days is another classic example of the similar thing. You know, like you can use the time and you can sit around and just sort of be lost in thought and kind of daydreaming, you know, not really maximizing the value of the opportunity. But I suppose it gives me a greater clarity on utilizing that opportunity, and whether it's just talking to people, sharing information, because it is kind of like that. We're all just students on different points in the timeline, you know, like, cool, I started 6 years ago. There'll be dudes that started 20 years ago and 30 years ago or whatever. And the way I think about it anyway is that we're all just students, whether you've got 50 jumps or 1,000 jumps. And there's many ways that I could articulate this, but we're all just as capable as making a mistake as others. And so I think given how the risk profile of the sport, super important to maintain that sort of beginner's mindset, because as soon as you get outside of that frame of mind, you start to become risk adverse, and you think that your experience or whatever, your flying capability, means you're less likely of making this mistake, which is just completely untrue. You know, you can have a jump where you've downsized canopies and you may be a little bit uncurrent, and you're so distracted and lost in thought on the jump as a result of those changes, and you're not really present on the jump, that you make some really wildly unexpected mistake. So, and you could have thousands of jumps. So, yeah, it's a super important thing in my mind. But sorry, if I'm getting a bit off topic, by the way, Shen, feel free to like pull me back if I'm losing the thread of the conversation. And by the way, guys, there's a chat function. So if you, down the bottom of your screen, if you click the chat box and have the chat box open, you can ask questions in the side there if you want to as well. I think you're all on mute for now, but if anyone wants to ask questions, click on the chat box and punch them into there, and we'll endeavor to try and get to them. But yeah, the first day, if we use that as the example, we're on hold until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So you think about it, it's a 4-day event. Everyone's taken time off work. It's like people have traveled from, whether it's around the country for it. There's a huge investment, you know, by people to be able to get there and to be able to prioritize being there, which is something I take super seriously. And I really try to be super mindful of always, in an attempt to add the most value in those situations, because you can't underestimate the effort and the amount people do to prioritize being there and to be able to attend. So we sit on the ground all day. All people want to do is fly. You know, everyone's just been hanging out for weeks or months. You just want to go flying, and you have to wait all day. And you're waiting, like if you think about it, at lunchtime though, you still don't actually know if you're going to be able to go skydiving. it's still a maybe. So we might wait for the next 6 hours and be like, okay, cool, we're not going to fly. So then to be able to just go, okay, 5 o'clock, it turns 5 o'clock, and then we're going to go flying, to have to go from like that kind of really dormant state of being to gear up, get in the plane, go. You know, there's a huge mental shift that goes on there. And again, if we prepare appropriately, it's no problem. But if we wait till, 4:45 when we get a 15-minute call and we get the go ahead, excuse me, well then I suppose essentially what we can still do it and it can still happen, but what we do, in the way I think about it, is we just dramatically change the risk profile of the activity, which is not really an acceptable trade-off in the way that I think about it. So yeah.
Keeping that stuff in mind, AK, how do you see the future of camps and things like this when it comes to weather days? Like, what would your ideal weather day be in terms of being able to utilize that time and do things, whether that's physically or mentally, to prepare and be better set up for the eventuality of jumping if that does happen, or to just use that time if it's a day on the ground?
Yeah, I think it's the first thing is just to be grateful for it. And again, it might sound super cheesy, but the first thing that I think about is just actually to be grateful for the opportunity to be there initially. That just puts us in a better frame of mind to actually make use of the time and actually enjoy it. It's so easy to just get into that mode of frustration and just wanting to be able to go flying, that you don't actually appreciate the time that you've got right now. So, and that's super relevant to like lockdown and the situation we're in around the world as well right now. Like some people, I know, like many of our friends, I would say, are making such good use of this time, which is awesome. But I also imagine there's lots of people in society that are really, just kind of wasting it and being, whether it's just wanting to be like this unconscious desire to be distracted. So wanting to play video games or wanting someone else to control their attention and to captivate their attention. But I guess in terms of that situation, it's so, yeah, be grateful for the opportunity, and then it's like make use of it. So the best thing to do initially from my point of view in that situation is get into groups and figure out jumps and plan jumps and try to get everyone in the mode so that if we do get an opportunity to go, we're organized and we're prepared. So do as much as we can relating to that. I know in Perth, we had the awesome opportunity of having Dane's girlfriend, Dali, there, who's like this insane yoga instructor. And I don't know if this happened in many other places, but we had like a couple of, pretty much the whole camp, a couple of formal yoga practices, maybe 2 or 3 formal yoga practices with pretty much the whole event participating. And that was super cool. There was people that just heavy on the beers as a way of definition, and that think that whole yoga stuff's some hippie nonsense, and maybe it is, but they like had never tried it, but it created an opportunity for them to give it a go, and they liked it. They thought it was, they really got something out of it. So maybe that starts them on a bit of a journey in that respect, and they learn and grow more. So that's super cool. But I don't think there's a right or wrong necessarily. It's just making use of the time, whether it's sitting around in a circle and sharing information. But I think it really just begins with actually appreciating the opportunity to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Do you have any ideas or tips for people that are maybe thinking of getting into event organizing or coaching in the future from your experience?
So I guess you just have to be clear on why it is that you're doing it and what the purpose is. If you're wanting to organize events, I mean, there's no shortage. The reality is there's no shortage on events around the world. If we think about where we've been, like over the last few years, there's an abundance of incredible events all around the world. So there's no shortage of them. There's phenomenal coaching available all over the world. And I would say like I'm super encouraging of anyone else getting into it and being involved in the industry in that way. I think it's awesome, and I think it just comes down to being clear on why it is you want to do it and just go for it. Like if you want to really, because really all it is adding value to other people and supporting the development of other people. It is certainly at least how I think about it. So yeah, if it's kind of along those lines, if you intrinsically enjoy supporting the development of others in that way and have some sort of motivation towards doing that, I think it's awesome and you should do it.
That's awesome. And you mentioned a little bit about gratitude earlier. And I know from knowing you and from having many conversations with you on drop zones, on camp evenings and party nights, that I know that gratitude and gratefulness is a really big part of your life and your ethos. So maybe you wanted to talk a little bit about that and maybe where that came from and what you believe around that.
I tell you what, I'm grateful for this background right now. How good is this background? Dude, I love this kind of video. How do we turn on the video for everyone, Shane? Can we turn on everyone's video?
I think they can turn their own videos on, yeah.
You guys should turn on your videos so we can see you. Ciao, Erica.
Hi, Jill.
Hey, hey, team. That's much nicer being able to see everyone. That's way better. All of a sudden, I felt like it was just you and I, Shane. I had to change the view, but that's cool. I'm grateful for technology right now. Hey, like, what's up, Fraser? To be honest, like, it's just, I guess it's just, because it's like, what's the alternative? is I suppose how I think about it. Like, if you're not grateful, it's just really a mindset shift. Like, you can either be stuck in the what you don't have and what isn't, and yeah, sort of stuck in that mode of thinking, or you can recognize that how good it is, that like as it is, like it doesn't need to be any different to how it is. And for sure, like there's people going through, like I would say, like probably if we're skydiving, we're super privileged. You know, it's not like it's a little bit more expensive than kicking a soccer ball out on the local park. So we're most likely super privileged if we're able to participate in this activity. So not discounting the hardship that many people are probably going through. There's many people that are going through right now. But, you know, there's always so much typically to be grateful for, whether it's just, you know, whether it's food, whether it's family, whether it's just, can be like super simple things, just like the ability to walk outside in nature, and yeah, super simple stuff. So I feel like it's just I don't know, it's just, there's no other really way to be that I can think of that would be good. Like that would be yeah, it's otherwise you're just going to be constantly wrestling with things that you don't have and things that aren't going. I suppose this gets down to the crust of what it is. Like, if you're not happy in life and you're not where you want to be or doing what you want to be doing, or yeah, there's some level of, and for sure, I like, don't get me wrong, I'm human, so I go through all the same thoughts and feelings and emotions. But it's more just trying to recognize if you get into those loops and patterns and short circuiting it as quickly as possible. But it's I just totally lost my train of thought. It's help me just get back on track, Shan. I'm just gone, I need some kombucha. I just like totally
I did tell everyone to bring the kombucha to this meeting.
I actually had some, but I left it in the fridge. I should go get it. But otherwise, like I feel like in life, if we're ever in a time when we're struggling or things are not going the way we want, then we feel like, whether it's we feel depressed or unhappy or whatever, but that's really the trigger. It's when things are not going the way you expect. So to sort of let go of all those expectations and to be able to just be grateful for however it is kind of a bit of a hack. I feel like it's a bit of a life hack, you know, but it's certainly not, it's not in our nature. It's not how we're initially wired to think. But yeah, I think it's just a much more, just a nicer way to be. Ghana, what's up, man? Nice background. Where are you at the moment, bro? It's beautiful over there. Yeah. Has anyone got any questions? We've got maybe, it's maybe a 10-minute call, I think, Shan, is that right? I think we only have 40 minutes. So if anyone has any questions or anything we want to talk about, like, I will reiterate, like, we're all just students along a journey, you know, along the same or a similar sort of journey. So there's always value in just sharing thoughts and information, because what might not be valuable to someone else obviously can add huge value to another. So I can see, Erica, you're typing furiously, so that's good. Let's have a bit of a two-way conversation.
Awesome.
Ground handling down.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Shan.
No, it's all right. I was just going to read out the question. I had a bit of a technical issue and got signed out of the meeting, but I'm back. So we can go straight to Erica's question about ground handling during the lockdown.
Yeah, so I was doing that. To be honest, Erica, if I'd had my canopy for years, actually, no, I still would have done it. That's not true. I was going to say it was only because it was brand new that I was probably doing that. I was definitely super motivated to fill it with wind and fly it a little bit because it was brand new. But yeah, for sure, ground handling, if it's funny, like, you've never been more keen for windy days, hey? As we have been, like, or certainly as I have been in lockdown. It's like, normally you don't want it and now you want it. So it's funny how things can change like that. But I think it's a good thing to do, like getting more familiar with your canopy, getting more familiar with the inputs. Ground handling it's a little bit different depending on the wind and like how consistent the wind is. If it's sort of gusty, then, you know, your canopy is going to like pressurize and then come down and repressurize. So it's harder to get a good feel for the control. But if there's a consistent, nice consistent wind, it's awesome to be ground handling and playing with that. So I would highly recommend it. Any tips? You need probably more wind than what you think. And then the main thing is just don't do it behind some like whether it's a line of trees or buildings and outside of turbulence. So you just get a clean airflow. Other than that, go do it, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. I was just thinking if there's any people in here that are maybe thinking about getting into yoga or meditation or learning more about mindfulness, some of the stuff you were talking about earlier. Do you have any tools that you used when you were starting out, or what type of yoga or what type of classes you went to, just to give people a little bit of information about what they could do if they're starting out on that path?
Yeah, I think it's just begin. To be honest, I think it's the same as really anything that's unknown and like any uncharted waters, is just begin. Like, it goes back to like what we're talking about relating to meditation. We fall into this trap of trying to imagine what hasn't happened, like this predictive mode of trying to imagine how it's going to be and what it's going to be like, and rather than actually just going and finding out what it is like and just going and answering the question like. So the biggest advice that I would give is just go and explore it and get curious. You know, don't assume that you know. Do the opposite. Assume that you have no idea, and just get curious. Like, get super childish and curious and interested and intrigued. And, you know, at the end of the day, if you are interested, you will just move towards it and you will explore it. And if you're not, you know, I can only emphasize for me how significant it was. I know, like, there's a bunch of us there, or a bunch of people I know, like flying wise, that might be either like super flexible from dancing and stuff as a young kid, or have been like, whether it's in acrobatics and gymnastics and all sorts of sort of disciplines where you're naturally going to be very physically body aware. But then there's a bunch of people that are super don't fall into that category. So it was a big pivotal thing for me. So I would just say, just go and explore it and get curious. I don't think the type of yoga matters, and, you know, the actual physical practice of yoga itself which I suppose is what we're kind of talking about. There's many different forms, but yeah, I think just begin, whether it's a hatha or just like a kind of a flow. It doesn't really matter. It's more just like, it's just exploring the unknown a little bit and being open to that you can't know where that leads, and just getting out of the mode of trying to predict what you think you know where it's going to go. If that makes any sort of sense.
Okay, we have a couple of minutes left, about 3 minutes. So James is asking, what avenues would you recommend to begin? YouTube, books, podcasts. I think you introduced me actually to a meditation app, Waking Up. I'm not sure if it was you or Tane or someone, but is there any other resources like that people could look up right now for any of that? Good podcasts you listen to?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the meditation app. Actually, that is such a life changer for me personally. So Sam Harris, if anyone knows of him, super like good author and writer, and just a super interesting cat. Does a crazy cool podcast as well. But he does a meditation app called Waking Up, and we can post a link maybe, because I can give a link that will give you a free month to it. And he breaks it down in a super nonsensical way, how to think about it. And he sort of removes a lot of the mystique around, I think, what it is. So, because I think a lot of people have a thing in their, a picture in their mind for what meditation is. And you got to drop all that and acknowledge if you don't do it that you don't know, and just begin to explore. And so he really takes you through a phenomenal process. So that app is insanely good. And then books, man, where to start on books? I haven't got so many books meditation wise specifically that I can think of. Guns, I might have to come back to it after this with some more information, because there's probably a bunch, but nothing that I can think of off the top of my head.
Maybe we can make
waking up for sure.
Maybe we can make a small book list for your AWOL page, AK, and share it there.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, definitely. That would be cool.
Speaking of that, we're now on 2 minutes, so we're running out of time. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and thank you, AK. Could you just share with us your social media where everyone can find you online after this?
For sure. So on Instagram, it's at andrewkier.awol. And then Facebook's just my name, Andrew Kier. And I think that's it. And then you can check out some of the videos on Vimeo. And yeah, that's it.
Cool. And you have an AWOL skydiving Facebook page too, don't you?
You've got such a good memory, Shane. Yes. and the AWOL skydiving page as well, yeah.
So that's just AWOL, AWOL skydiving. And yeah, you can find all of his events there and everything there as well. Oh, and the website. You're right, Gans. He does have a new website. It's very shiny and pretty.
I suck at this, Gans. Flyingisawol.com is the website. So it's pretty new. Super cool. Shout out to Lex for helping us make it. Go check it out. Would love any feedback if you have a look at it. But yeah, you can head there. It's got a bunch of good content. So go on for sure. Check it out. Flyingisawol.com.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, we're going to open up everyone's mics, and everyone can just shout a big fuck yeah. Thank you, AK. Woo! Fuck yeah.
Okay, cheers, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Ciao.
From Chile.
A good one.
Bye.
Thank you, Shan.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Cheers, Shannon.
Nice one, guys. Thank you for joining.
Bye.
Cheers, mate.